This is a webcast recording for Modern European History, Review Day, Final Exam, Essay Prompt number 2. Remember, you have 2 essay prompts that you must prepare for. I will select one of them. You will not know which prompt I select until you receive the exam on the day of the final. Essay prompt number 2 asks, why is the 20th century the American century? Of course, I want to comment about the idea of a century. Um, this prompt implies that around 1900, the United States started to assert itself economically, politically, and militarily in the story of European history and even global history. If we start at 1900, you could say, well, that's more than a century because we're in 2013. So I acknowledge that we're not necessarily talking about a literal 100-year period only. If you wanted to take the marking place of 1900 and extend it into the 2000s, that would be an acceptable way to address this prompt. Pay attention to the teacher notes there. This is just a guide to help you to think, investigate, brainstorm, and develop some argumentation and support for why the 20th century is indeed the American century. When we look at the backstory that you might want to include in your introduction, we can see the United States starts in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution. Certainly the Declaration of Independence is an important moment as it separates us from our mother country of Great Britain, but it also asserts the founding values of the country, being that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator certain unalienable rights, the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This becomes the heartbeat of the nation and certainly becomes a model for all other nations that might want to replicate the same value systems that the United States has been based upon. From the founding independence years, we do have the constitutional years, setting up a federal government in 3 branches. That's all based upon the written document of the U.S. Constitution. In that Constitution, it asserts the idea of we the people, and it also establishes the civil liberties that the individual people of the United States possess and cannot be denied by the government. Of course, we see those rights given in the Bill of Rights and all the constitutional amendments that have been added throughout the years of the United States. So these become some important groundbreaking moments for the United States and arguably the world. Another background element to this prompt is just the way in which world powers rise, are sustained for a time, and then fall. So when this class started back in August, we started looking in the late 1400s into the early 1500s, in which Spain was the dominant country of the world, as evidenced by their western exploration, the financing of the Christopher Columbus voyages across the Atlantic into what was called the New World. This demonstrated a significant amount of shipping expertise and tied Spain into the New World wealth that it, for a time, increased the economic power of Spain. But as the century moves on, the superpower relationships will change. France will have a century of dominance in the mid-1650s into the 1750s. We see Spain will drop. England is also on the rise. Later on, in the next century, England will surpass France, largely because of the effects of the French Revolution will help weaken France, and England is gaining ground and surpassing France because of the Industrial Revolution advantages that England had. And we also start to see the United States emerge into the story, particularly in the 1770s, as I mentioned, when it becomes a new nation. By 1850 and into the 1900s, the relationships of the superpowers changes again. I'm adding Russia in the mix, even though we haven't covered Russia with a strong focus. It does come into the story of the 20th century. The United States and Germany are emerging nations in the late 1800s and into the 1900s. When you get to 1900 and 1950, certainly in these years you have the World War I story and the World War II story. The United States is a big player in both of those. So you see world power relationships altering during this 50-year period of time. After World War II, the United States and Soviet Union emerge as the two superpowers. And of course, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses, allowing for the United States to be the lone superpower in the world. Of course, there are other powers that still exist globally. One of the intriguing stories of the post-Cold War years is the introduction of China in the superpower list. I wanted to show you a couple images. This is Teddy Roosevelt, President of the United States in 1901. He's identified here as the world's constable, a police officer. You can see him swinging his billy club. Like I said, in the year 1900, the United States is really demonstrating itself globally in a more significant way than it had done before. And Teddy Roosevelt was the President of the United States during these years that starts to assert the United States internationally. One of the particulars of Teddy Roosevelt's administration and his influence globally is his role in the United States construction of the Panama Canal. As you can see him shoveling dirt, excavating dirt, building the canal. Now literally he didn't create the canal, but he, as a President of the United States, pushed the United States to successfully achieve this construction project because the canal was a very important economic and military trade route. You can see in this graph, with the canal, it would shorten the distance significantly for American trade between New York City and San Francisco, the East Coast to the West Coast. No longer would we have to travel down around South America. And of course, this would also expedite military ship traffic from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So the Panama Canal was a significant construction project that had tremendous impact economically and militarily for American self-interest. Interestingly enough, the Panama Canal and its construction was completed in 1914, the same year in which World War I breaks out, which is also a pivotal event for showcasing the United States' entry as a dominant international player. You should remember from studying World War I, the United States joins that war late and does give significant numbers of troops and materiel and financial capability to the Allied success and victory versus the Central Powers. So all that is some background to consider in addressing this prompt. Your thesis, I just am suggesting to take a look at how you might manufacture some brainstorming and some concepts from the 4 notes that I gave you on the prompt language. And I'm not suggesting that you use all of these. As the author, you're going to have to figure out what your thesis is and how you're going to craft it. But think deeply. I'm not going to give you an example like I did with the isms because it's difficult for me to give you an example without actually answering the prompt directly. So you'll have to do this work on your own. But I would go through the same type of process, brainstorming, writing stuff down on paper, conceptually, taking those concepts and putting them into language that becomes a one single sentence argument of why the 20th century is the American century that is crystal clear, sophisticated, complex, insightful, and argumentative, something that you could support with evidence and analysis in the body paragraphs.